we couldn't preach a message on God's love, on the excellence of love, on the value of life, if we wouldn't also acknowledge that February, we celebrate and acknowledge Black History Month. And while just speaking for myself, I do not think that as a nation, we can encompass the fullness of the African American heritage, sacrifice, and contributions in just 1 month, as Black History Month is American history. It is my prayer that every day, we as God's people can acknowledge that it's both our differences and commonalities as people that are necessary to one another in the value of life and honoring God. For our younger audience or those that might not know, Black History Month was first recognized by President Ford in 1976, actually established by and with the help of a scholar, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who was from Virginia actually, and he was the second African-American man to graduate from Harvard. But the journey to establish Black History Month goes back all the way to 1915 in Chicago. And the reason Dr. Woodson chose February was to honor Abraham Lincoln's birthday on February 12th, but the birthday of another man that had, I would say, even a further greater contribution, known on February 14th, Frederick Douglass. And however, it is believed that Frederick Douglass, due to the unbelievable life of hardships and circumstances, he didn't actually know his birthday. And I just found it fitting to honor these names to begin with. And for those that are watching online or not familiar with the life of Frederick Douglass, I absolutely encourage you to read and learn about his life. He lived and suffered to further the value of life, freedom, and equality in our nation. And I assure you the enemy is very intentional. But we have also been called. We also have been empowered. You have been given all the power and all the authority of servitude, of loving God. And so I want to end this service on that note of servitude. And actually, I want to end it with a quote from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., if you can bring that up. We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and action of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of good people. Human progress never rolls on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of men willing to be co-workers with God. And without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation. We must use time creatively and in the knowledge that the time is always right to do right. And in a further quote, he tells us the struggle should be non-violent. Dr. King said, because violence can bring temporary victory, but not permanent peace. And so, beloved, I believe that 1 Corinthians 13 embodies this idea of how we are to share the gospel out of love and love alone. Love for God above all things, and for our fellow men, desiring everyone's everlasting life.
Before we move on in the service, I just want to pause just a moment in the service to recognize part of February is African American and Black History Month. And, you know, as a church, you can look around at this church and see that we are a very multicultural church. We're a very multicultural family. And it is something, and it's an honor to serve God in that area. And, you know, oftentimes we get in this area, and, you know, as white folks, it's like, okay, what do we do with this? You know, we don't want to, it's like we have a hard time even acknowledging the amazing price that the African American church has paid for us. To be able to do what we do today has been paved by many people, and the road has been paved with many, many people before us. And I was thinking about that this week with one of the great theologians, and his name is, as many of us know, his name is Derek Bonhoeffer. And Bonhoeffer's writing today, we find it so rich and we find it so fascinating. And you're like, well, why are you talking about a German guy, white guy, when you're talking about African American history? And what happened with the German writer and theologian Bonhoeffer is that he was born in Germany. And he was born in Germany, and he was raised, and he had an amazing mind when it came to theology. And he was influenced by a lot of areas, and then all of a sudden the Nazi regime raised up, and he was standing up against it, and they were coming after him, and he escaped and he came to America. And he found himself in Harlem, of all places. New York City and Harlem. A German immigrant there. An amazing mind. And he became fascinated with the African American church and how they were seeking justice, and how no matter the persecution that they felt and no matter what was happening around him, that they would continue standing up. He was reading about the lynchings that were happening down south. He was reading about the church being persecuted down south, and it convicted him so much as somebody that ran away from Germany to protect himself. That though there was great opposition for him to go back, because people say, if you go back, you're going to be killed. If you go back, you're more valuable alive than you are dead. But he said, I cannot keep silent what is happening back home. And so though he knew that it would meant his life, because of what he saw going on in America, because he saw the people laying down their lives, laying down their will, and praying, God, let your will be done. He would go back to Germany. He would be quickly arrested. He'd be tried and executed in one of the concentration camps because the influence of the African American church. And so as somebody that has been influenced by the African American church within America, that has seen the price that they have paid, that has stood with amazing figures in our lives, and have the opportunity to stand shoulder to shoulder with some of the greatest people within history, recent history within the African American church, I just want to say thank you to that church that has always been a praying church. Thank you to that church that has always sought and stood up for justice as they see it. Thank you to that church that has given us so much song and so much voice. Thank you for that church that has shown us what it's like to truly serve God and pay a price, though you might not see the reward on this side of heaven, knowing that all of eternity is standing up with you and celebrating. And so as a pastor, I want to say thank you to the African American church. When you look around our church and what we've done here, what God has done, there's a sign not too far away from us, about a mile away, if even, that is a sign of one of the last lynchings in the United States. Just right down the road from us. You ride by here on Sunday morning and you see the segregation that goes on. And when I look at our church, I just say, God, thank you for bringing us all together, worshiping you and giving voice to so many different voices. Whether that is somebody that was born in the United States, whether that's somebody that's African American, whether that's somebody from Kenya, Romania, wherever you might find yourself at from today, being here is a testament of what God is doing in this community for his glory.